Spirit into every troubled breast. Let us all in thee inherit. Let us find the promised rest. Take away the love of sinning. Alpha and Omega be. End of faith as its beginning. Set our hearts at liberty. Come, Almighty, to deliver. Let us all thy life receive. Suddenly return and never, never more thy temples leave. Thee we would be always blessing. Serve thee as thy host above. Pray and praise thee without ceasing. Glory in thy perfect love. Finish then thy new creation, pure and spotless let us be. Let us see thy great salvation, perfectly restored in thee. Changed from glory into glory, till in heaven we take our place, till we cast our crowns before thee, lost in wonder, love and praise.
Welcome once again to Sunday evening reflections, and for this Sunday and next Sunday we're going to be looking together at the book of Obadiah. Obadiah in the Old Testament is a book that's often overlooked for two reasons. One is that it's the shortest book in the Old Testament, and secondly because it really consists of quite a harsh prophecy of condemnation against the Edomites. However, I became aware of the book really as a boy because it used to be one of my brother's favourites to choose, because he always said you could read a whole book of the Bible in one go. The book of Obadiah then, as I say, is a prophecy against the Edomites. Who were they? Well, in a sense, they were relatives of the Israelites. The Edomites were descended from Esau, who was the older brother of Jacob. Jacob is the one that the Israelites were descended from, called Israelites, because Jacob's name was changed by God from Jacob to Israel. So there was that connection between the two. And where did they live? Well, the Edomites lived in the difficult country to the south of the Dead Sea. They lived just below, if you like, the country of Judah. So they were neighbours as well physically, as well in the sense of being family. The Edomites suffered after the fall of Judah and Jerusalem. The trouble that came there, which this prophecy refers to, also then came to the Edomites. Some of them fled as refugees north and west from where they were, just across the border into Judah, and formed there the territory which became known as Idumea. While we might not think we know much about Idumea, it was from that area and those people that came the king, Herod the Great, who was king in the time when Jesus was born in Bethlehem, and his son Herod the Tetrarch, who was around in Galilee at the time of Jesus and John the Baptist, and becomes involved in the story of Jesus's own crucifixion. So those are the Edomites. Those are the Edomites, and the prophecy begins in verse 1 by a simple declaration that Edom is to be destroyed. We learn that the Edomites, when Judah was suffering from the Babylonians, not only felt that it didn't really matter to them, but they also got involved in some of that destruction. And the Edomites' confidence, where did their pride and sense of security come from? Well, in verses 2 to 4, the Edomites big themselves up, as it were, but God challenges them and says that he will make them small among the nations. And indeed, in so many ways, Edom was a very insignificant country compared to Babylon and Egypt and lands like that. Paul gives us this advice in Romans chapter 12, verse 3. Do not think of yourselves more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment. That's something that could have been applied to the Edomites, who might have had a fairer measure or a better measure of their standing in the world. Pride is never a wise thing, because pride gives us a sense of security, but in fact is a false sense. And the Edomites boasted that their hills would be their protection. Who can bring me down to the ground, was their boast. Well, verse 6 poetically answers that, perhaps the most poetic verse in the whole of the prophecy, and it says this: Now you soar like the eagle and make your nest among the stars. From there I will bring you down, declares the Lord. There are many who feel safe and secure. There are still many who boast and know pride. There are those who seek their destiny perhaps among the stars of one kind or another. But there are many things in the world today which are quite sobering, quite humbling, and gives us sometimes a real sense of insecurity. The COVID pandemic has changed the way we live across the whole of the world and made us realize that each and every one of us might be vulnerable. The massive changes that have taken place in Afghanistan are surprising some of the leaders of the world and its most powerful nations by the very speed of the change there. Has also led to this sense that things are not secure. And across the world, there have been floods and dangerous fires and other events too, which would cause us as human beings to reject pride and think that we are safe or that we are in control. The next part of the prophecy talks about the thoroughness of what God chooses to do. And Obadiah uses two simple illustrations of things which contrast with the thoroughness of God's judgment. Firstly, so think about thieves. Thieves leave an awful lot behind. They only take what they want. Having got what they want, they escape and leave lots of things behind. His second illustration is of fruit pickers, in this particular case, grape pickers. And he said, however careful they are, they always miss some. There are always grapes left behind. But nothing escapes the eye of God. Nothing will be left behind of the Edomites. Nothing will be left behind by God's judgment. There is no being overlooked. And worse for the Edomites, it's prophesied that their friends and their allies will take them by surprise because they will betray them when least expected. Who could the Edomites count on to help them when God's judgment was close? And the answer was no one. And for us too, the answer is there is no help, unless, of course, we have the gospel answer that there is help for us in Jesus. but Obadiah would not have heard that message. Perhaps the Edomites put their trust in their wise leaders and in their brave warriors, but all of that would be no defense. So why are the Edomites in such trouble? And the answer to this, why is this happening to them, is because of 5 cases of inhumanity that Obadiah outlines. The first 4 are: you stood aloof, you looked down on your brother, you chose to rejoice over the people of Judah in their day of misfortune, and you chose to boast so much in their day of trouble. Here then are 4 things that are judged, the opposites of which, of course, as Christians, we should embrace. The first is we shouldn't stand aloof, we should get involved. The parable, of course, that tells us this so clearly is the story of the Good Samaritan. 2 passed by, but 1, he got really involved. And that was the failing of the Edomites. They stepped back thinking what's happening to Judah just north of us is nothing to do with us. We don't need to be involved. The second, you look down on your brother. We are called instead to show respect to everyone, to look for the face of God in the face of other people is the encouragement that's been made to us. I've been reading this week the story of a man who was a barber, and he came across a homeless man who he knew, and so he gave him a haircut. And the next time he met the man had got 2 or 3 friends there, and they all got a haircut. And this has begun what we would call a ministry for this individual. He goes round as barber to quite a number of homeless people, and as he works, like every barber, he listens to the stories, and he gets the story of how these people have ended up on the street. And through that simple personal action, he's showing respect for those that others perhaps would look down their noses at. Then the Edomites are condemned because they chose to rejoice when the people of Judah were suffering in their day of misfortune. They just laughed about it. And the opposite of that, of course, we're called upon to empathize, to put ourselves into the place of someone else, to be sympathetic in our approach to them, to try and understand what life might be like for them and why they are where they are. And of course, we are called to be humble. You chose to boast so much in their day of trouble. You know, it's happening to you. It couldn't possibly happen to me, was the attitude of the Edomites. The Christian attitude is quite the opposite. There go I, but for the grace of God is an old expression, but there's a great deal of truth in it. In others' misfortunes, even when we are fortunate, we recognize that there is a kinship, and we should be humble about our good fortune when others are suffering. And then 5th and finally, the Edomites were condemned because they didn't just stand on one side and have a laugh at the other's expense, but more than that, they joined in the violence against Judah. We find in verses 13 and 14. They took what valuables they could, and they even seized refugees, those who were fleeing, and handed them back to their oppressors, probably to be enslaved, maybe even worse, to be killed outright. And so the Edomites joined in with the strong in having a go at their weak neighbours, those who were suffering. And of course, the challenge to us is to love, and part of that love is to stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. Quite the reverse of what the Edomites were doing. We have an expression, don't we? Kicking a man when he's down, and that in a sense was what the Edomites were doing. And as Christians, when someone is down, we're called upon to lend a hand and lift them up where, whenever we can. So let's pray together. Loving Father, we thank you for the prophet Obadiah and for his insights, for the challenge that he brings to all those who feel that they are safe and secure in themselves and not recognize that we all come under your watchful eye and that we are all measured against the standards of Jesus. Help us not only to be humble, but to be helpful, to be ready to understand our neighbour and where we can to reach out and to show compassion and to offer practical help where that is needed. And so we just ask that you will guide us in the way that we live so that we might show an example to others, but more than showing an example, that we may show love to all that we meet. And we ask it in the name and for the sake of Jesus Christ. Amen. As tonight we're talking about how our actions may be reflected in how God responds to us, I thought I would share this video from the Santander Triathlon. During this race, James, who comes from Great Britain, takes a wrong turn, and you'll see him run into the barrier, which allows Diego of Spain to overtake him and have an opportunity to become the third place in the race. But Diego chooses to stop and wait and let James pass him again, saying he deserved third place. He was in front of me all the way around. It's quite a remarkable piece of sportsmanship. See what you think.
Madre mía, qué carrera del inglés. Aparece en escena. ¡No! Ha perdido este juego querido. Ahí está Mentira, que aparece, vamos a ver, porque se frena y pasa aquí. El tercero, efectivamente. Madre mía, qué tallazo. Qué tallazo de Mentira, que se ha quedado sin el podium. Ha sido cuarto al final. En la prueba, quinto Torrilla, sexto Gustavo Rodríguez, que ha perdido. Vamos a hablar con Mentrida, ¿eh? Uno de los grandes protagonistas hoy aquí, Mentrida.
Presence of the Lord, the Holy One is here. Come bow before Him now with reverence and fear. In Him no sin is found. We stand on holy ground. Be still for the presence of the Lord, the Holy One is here. Be still for the glory of the Lord is shining all around. He burns with holy fire, with splendor He is crowned. How awesome is the sight, our radiant King of light. Be still for the glory of the Lord is shining all around. Be still for the power of the Lord is moving.